Sometimes, a simple act of kindness can open a door you never expected. It can pull you into a stranger's world, one full of secrets, power, and danger. And once you step into that world, there's no walking back out quietly. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. It was a Saturday afternoon at Willow Creek Mall, one of those massive shopping centers that seem to stretch for miles. Families move from store to store with shopping bags, the smell of buttery pretzels drifting through the air. Kids laugh near the play area, and the low hum of chatter filled every corner. Hannah Miller had brought her 6-year-old son Mason for their usual weekend outing. Mason loved the toy store on the 3rd floor, and Hannah figured they'd grab some lunch after. She wasn't in a rush. Saturdays were their time to slow down. They were walking past the food court when she heard it, a faint, panicked cry. At first, she thought it was just another kid throwing a tantrum. But then she noticed a little boy, no more than 3 years old, standing alone near the water fountain. His cheeks were red, his hair sticking to his forehead from tears. He clutched a small blue dinosaur plush to his chest, looking left and right like the world had suddenly turned unfamiliar. Hannah's eyes scanned the crowd. No frantic parent in sight. "Hey, buddy," she said gently, walking toward him. Mason trailed behind her, holding her hand. "Are you lost?" The boy's lip trembled. I can't find Daddy." Hannah crouched down to his level. "It's okay. What's your name?" "Eli," he whispered. Her stomach tightened. She had heard stories. Kids wandering off in busy malls, parents panicking. She'd even read about darker situations that made her skin crawl. "All right, Eli. We're going to find your daddy," she said firmly, trying to keep her voice calm. Hannah looked around again. She expected to see security guards or maybe a store employee who could help. Nothing. The nearest information desk was on the other side of the food court. She knew she couldn't just leave Eli there. She extended her hand. "Can you hold my hand so we can walk together?" He nodded, clutching both her hand in his plush. Mason watched silently, clearly sensing something serious. They began moving toward the information desk. Hannah's eyes swept every face in the crowd. People were too busy to notice, a reminder that danger often hides in plain sight. Halfway there, she saw him. A tall man, broad-shouldered, in a navy jacket, was striding toward them. His eyes locked on Eli instantly, and relief flooded his face. But there was something else in his expression, sharpness, like he'd just stepped out of a high-stakes situation. "Eli!" the man called out, his voice carrying over the noise. The little boy yanked his hand free and ran to him. The man scooped him up, hugging him tightly before pulling back to inspect him. "Are you okay? Did anyone talk to you?" Eli shook his head, still clinging to his plush. The man turned to Hannah. "You found him?" She nodded. "He was by the fountain. I didn't see anyone with him, so I thought I'd bring him to the information desk." The man studied her for a moment, as if memorizing her face. His eyes were an intense gray, and there was a steadiness about him, too controlled to be ordinary. "Thank you," he said finally. "I'm John Carter." He extended his hand. "You probably just saved my son from something I don't even want to imagine." Hannah shook his hand. "I'm glad he's okay." Mason peeked from behind her leg. John smiled at him briefly, but there was still a trace of tension in his jaw. Not many people would stop to help. John said, shifting Eli on his hip. "Most would walk right past." Hannah shrugged. "I'm a mom. I couldn't just leave him." John's eyes softened slightly. "I used to work in the Secret Service. Retired now. But I know what can happen in places like this. You did the right thing." The weight of his words lingered. Hannah felt a flicker of unease. There was something about the way he said it, as if he knew more than he was letting on. They exchanged polite goodbyes, and John disappeared into the crowd with Eli in his arms. Hannah turned back toward the toy store with Mason, trying to shake the strange feeling. The rest of the afternoon was uneventful, but the image of that man, his sharp gaze, his deliberate words, kept replaying in her mind. That night, after putting Mason to bed, Hannah made tea and settled on the couch. Out of habit, she checked the local news on her phone. A small headline caught her attention. "Increase in child disappearances in Tri-County area. Police urge parents to stay alert." Her stomach twisted. She read the article. The cases involved toddlers and young children, mostly from public places, parks, malls, busy streets. No suspects. No leads. Hannah set the phone down and rubbed her forehead. It was probably a coincidence. Still, she wondered, had Eli almost been another headline? The days passed, and life returned to its usual rhythm. Mason went to school, Hannah worked part-time from home, and errands filled the afternoons. The mall incident faded into the background, though she found herself glancing over her shoulder a little more often in public. On the 5th evening after meeting John Carter, it was quiet in her neighborhood. The sun had set, casting long shadows across the street. Hannah was in the kitchen, rinsing dishes, when Mason ran in from the living room. "Mom," he said, "there are cars outside." She wiped her hands and walked to the front window. Two black SUVs were parked across the street, engines off. Windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. Her pulse picked up. They weren't neighbors. No one in the cul-de-sac drove anything like that. She stood there, staring, when the passenger door of the first SUV opened. Someone stepped out. Hannah froze at the window, her fingers tightening around the curtain. The man who stepped out of the first SUV was tall, wearing a black coat that fell just past his knees. His posture was straight, his movements unhurried. He wasn't looking around like a lost delivery driver. He was looking directly at her house. The porch light from across the street caught part of his face, clean-shaven, sharp features, maybe mid-40s. He had the kind of expression that gave away nothing. The second SUV's door opened. Another man stepped out. This one was broader, built like a linebacker. His coat was zipped to the neck, hands in his pockets. They exchanged a glance, then started walking toward her driveway. Hannah's first thought was to grab her phone. Her second was to check the lock on the front door. "Mason," she said, keeping her voice steady, "go upstairs for a bit, okay?" "Why?" "Just go. I'll call you when it's time for bed." He hesitated but obeyed, his small feet thumping up the stairs. By the time she reached the door, the men were halfway across her yard. She locked the deadbolt and took a step back. The sound of their shoes crunching on the gravel grew louder. Then came the knock. Firm, not frantic, not polite, just 3 solid raps that expected an answer. She took a breath and cracked the door an inch, the chain lock still in place. "Yes." The tall man spoke first. "Mrs. Miller?" His voice was deep, even. "Who's asking?" she replied. He reached into his coat slowly, pulling out a small leather wallet. Inside was a badge, dark blue, gold lettering. She couldn't make out all the words in the distance, but she saw Federal at the top. "We'd like to speak with you," he said. "About what?" The broader man shifted his weight. "About the incident at Willow Creek Mall last Saturday." Hannah's pulse quickened. "What incident?" she asked, though she already knew what they meant. The tall man's eyes didn't leave hers. "The one involving a lost child named Eli Carter." Her fingers tightened on the door. "Is he okay?" "He's fine," the tall man said. "This isn't about his safety right now. This is about yours." The words landed heavy in the air. "Why would my safety be in question?" "That's what we need to explain," he replied. "But we can't do it standing on your porch." Hannah's mind raced. Federal badge or not, she wasn't about to let 2 strangers into her house without knowing who they really were. "Can you show me identification? Something with a name?" she asked. The tall man opened the wallet wider, holding it up so she could see. His name was listed as Special Agent Thomas Rourke. The other man introduced himself as Agent Daniel Briggs. She still hesitated. "If you're federal agents, you can talk to me right here." Rourke's jaw tightened just slightly. "Mrs. Miller, we're not here to cause alarm, but what you did at the mall put you in the middle of an ongoing investigation. The sooner we explain, the better." Her eyes darted to the SUVs. Tinted windows. Engines off. They weren't in a rush, but they also weren't leaving. Finally, she unhooked the chain and opened the door halfway, standing the gap, so they couldn't just walk past her. "Fine. Talk." Rourke glanced around the quiet street before speaking. "The man you met that day, John Carter, Eli's father, wasn't just a retired Secret Service agent. He's been working with us on a case involving organized child trafficking." Hannah's chest tightened. Briggs continued, his voice low. "We believe Eli was targeted that day at the mall. You might have stopped an abduction without realizing it." Her hand went cold on the doorknob. "Targeted? You mean someone was there to take him?" Rourke nodded once. "We've been tracking the group for months. They're careful, they blend in, but they've made mistakes before. The fountain area was a blind spot for the mall security cameras. Perfect place for someone to snatch a child without being seen." The thought made Hannah's stomach churn. "So what does this have to do with me?" she asked. "Because," Rourke said evenly, "you were seen. The people we're after might not know who you are yet, but they could find out, and if they think you can identify them." He let the sentence trail off. A chill crept up her spine. Briggs stepped in. "We're not saying this to scare you, Mrs. Miller, but we need you to be cautious. Don't change your routines too obviously, but be alert. If you notice anything unusual, vehicles, people watching you, call this number immediately." He handed her a plain white business card, with only a phone number printed in black. Hannah took it, feeling its slight weight in her palm. "So you're saying I might be in danger?" "Potentially," Rourke said. "We're here because we want to keep it from becoming more than that." Mason's footsteps creaked on the stairs above. Hannah glanced up instinctively, then back at the men. "I have a son," she said quietly. Rourke's eyes softened. "We know, and that's why we're taking this seriously." For a long moment, no one spoke. The night outside seemed heavier, the air thicker. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, then went silent. Finally, Hannah stepped back. All right, I'll keep my eyes open. But I don't want anyone following me home again without warning. You have my word, Rourke said. They gave a brief nod, turned, and walked back to the SUVs. The engines roared to life almost in unison. She watched as they pulled away, taillights fading into darkness at the end of the street. She closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it for a moment, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Upstairs, Mason called down. Mom, who was at the door? Just someone asking questions, she replied, forcing her voice to sound casual. Everything's fine. But everything didn't feel fine. Not even close. She picked up the business card again. The plain black number seemed to almost come in her hand. That night, sleep came slow. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the two men walking up her driveway. And every time she opened them, she kept glancing at the shadow of the street outside, half expecting another car to pull up. The next morning, Hannah woke earlier than usual. The sunlight was still pale, stretching across the living room floor. She had barely slept. Every sound during the night had felt louder than normal. The creak of the house settling, the hum of the refrigerator, even the wind brushing against the windows made her sit up and listen. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the white business card lying in the center. The number seemed so ordinary, but it carried weight now. She thought about Agent Rourke's words. If you notice anything unusual, call immediately. Mason padded into the kitchen, hair sticking up in every direction. Morning, Mom, he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. Morning, buddy, she said, trying to sound normal. You want pancakes? He nodded, smiling faintly, and for a moment, the heaviness in her chest eased. She flipped the pancakes while Mason sat at the counter, swinging his legs. She wanted things to stay this normal, but she knew they might not. After breakfast, she dropped Mason off at school. The street outside the building was busy with parents and buses. She scanned the parked cars automatically, looking for black SUVs. There were none, but she caught herself checking faces in passing vehicles anyway. At the grocery store, she noticed a man in a gray hoodie lingering near the end of the cereal aisle. He wasn't shopping. He was just standing, looking at his phone. Every time she moved to a different aisle, he seemed to end up nearby. Her palms felt clammy. She told herself it was coincidence. People walked around stores all the time without purpose. Still, she tested it. She doubled back to the produce section, and minutes later, there he was again, leaning against a display of oranges. She didn't confront him. Instead, she kept her head down, grabbed the last few items she needed, and went straight to checkout. By the time she pushed her cart outside, he was gone. The cold air hit her face, and she quickened her pace to the car. She loaded the groceries into the trunk and glanced around the parking lot. Everything looked normal, but the unease clung to her. When she got home, she locked the door immediately. She was halfway through putting away the groceries when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Hello. A man's voice, calm, measured. Mrs. Miller? Yes. This is Agent Rourke. I need to ask you something important. Did you notice anyone unusual today? Her throat tightened. Why? We've had some movement on the case. It's possible the people we're tracking are trying to confirm who you are. Hannah glanced at the window, her voice low. At the grocery store, there was a man in a gray hoodie. I don't know if he was following me, but he showed up in 3 different aisles. Did you get a good look at his face? No. He was always a little turned away. There was a pause. All right, Rourke said. From now on, I need you to keep mental notes of these things. Clothing, vehicles, any small details. Don't try to confront anyone. Just keep your distance and call me if it feels wrong. She nodded even though he couldn't see her. Understood. After the call, she sat on the couch, her mind running in circles. She didn't want Mason to know anything. He'd be frightened. But pretending nothing was wrong was starting to feel impossible. That afternoon, she went to pick Mason up from school. The kids poured out of the building, backpacks bouncing, voices filling the air. Mason ran toward her, smiling. But behind him, parked near the corner of the street, was a black sedan with tinted windows. It wasn't one of the SUVs she'd seen before, but the driver was watching the schoolyard. Hannah's stomach sank. She didn't want to draw attention to herself, so she kept her pace steady, took Mason's hand, and walked him to the car. As she buckled him in, she glanced over her shoulder. The sedan was still there. She drove away slowly, checking the rearview mirror. The sedan stayed 2 cars back for 3 turns. Then, suddenly, it turned off into a side street. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was something. When they got home, Mason bounded upstairs to play with his toy cars. Hannah stayed downstairs, staring out the front window. She was starting to feel like a thread being pulled tighter and tighter, waiting for the snap. That evening, while Mason watched the cartoon, Hannah stepped outside to bring in the trash bins. The air was cool, quiet. She dragged the bin up the driveway and froze. Down the street, about 4 houses away, there was a man standing under a street lamp. He wasn't moving, just standing there, hands in his pockets, looking in her direction. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. She forced herself not to run. She walked back inside, locked the door, and peeked through the curtains. The man was gone. Later that night, she sat in the living room with a business card in hand. She knew she should call Rourke, but a part of her resisted. What if she was overreacting? What if every strange thing was just her mind making patterns that weren't there? But then she thought of Mason, asleep upstairs, and the decision was made. She dialed the number. Rourke answered on the second ring. What happened? There was a man outside, just standing, 4 houses down, looking this way. Silence for a moment, then, all right, stay inside. I'm sending someone to drive through the neighborhood. Keep your doors locked. Hannah hung up and double-checked every lock in the house. She pulled the curtains closed tight and sat on the couch, trying to listen for any sound that didn't belong. Minutes passed like hours. Then, faintly, she heard the low rumble of a car outside. She peeked through the edge of the curtain. One of the black SUVs was cruising slowly down the street. It didn't stop. It didn't need to. Hannah stepped back from the window. She wasn't sure she felt safer or more aware of just how serious things were becoming. The next day began quietly, but Hannah no longer trusted quiet. The air in her neighborhood felt different, like the stillness before a storm. She could almost feel eyes on her when she stepped out to start the car for the school run. Mason sat in the back seat, humming to himself. Hannah kept checking the rearview mirror on the way to school. The streets looked ordinary. Parents walking kids to crosswalks, joggers passing on sidewalks, but every unfamiliar car felt like a potential threat. After dropping Mason off, she decided to take the long way home, circling through 2 side streets. Halfway down one of them, she spotted a dark SUV parked on the corner. Not the exact one she'd seen before. This one was smaller, maybe a Chevy Tahoe, but it had the same dark tint and unmarked look. She slowed as she passed, pretending to check her phone while glancing at the driver. Sunglasses, baseball cap, no expression. The man didn't look back at her. He just sat still. Her mind told her to keep driving like nothing was wrong, so she did. But when she reached her driveway, the SUV was gone from her rearview mirror. She tried to settle into work at her laptop, but concentration was impossible. Around noon, she got a text from an unknown number. Stay alert. We'll check in tonight. Or it had to be Rourke. She didn't remember giving him her number, but of course, he was federal. He probably had it from the start. She made lunch, ate quickly, and kept herself busy with chores. By mid-afternoon, it felt almost normal again until her phone rang. The caller ID showed Willow Creek Elementary. Mrs. Miller, the voice said. This is the school office. I just want to confirm that you called earlier to say Mason will be picked up by a family friend today. Hannah's stomach dropped. No, she said sharply. I didn't call. Mason is to wait for me like always. There was a pause. All right, we'll keep him here until you arrive. She hung up and immediately dialed Rourke's number. He answered in one ring. What happened? Someone called the school pretending to be me. They said a family friend was picking Mason up. His tone hardened. Don't go to the school yet. Wait for my call. I'm sending an agent to meet you there. What? No, I'm going now. Hannah, he cut in, voice firm but controlled. Listen to me. If someone has tried to intercept your son, you do not walk into that alone. Stay inside. I'll have a unit at your house in under 10 minutes. She was shaking, but forced herself to lock the doors and pace the living room. 10 minutes felt like an hour. Then she saw to the front window, a black SUV pulling into her driveway. For a split second, fear gripped her, but the driver's side door opened to reveal Agent Briggs. Let's go, he said as she stepped outside. The drive to the school was fast but silent. Briggs kept scanning the mirrors. When they arrived, Hannah spotted Mason waiting inside the main office, his backpack on the floor beside him. He lit up when he saw her. Mom, he said, running into her arms. She crouched and hugged him tight, breathing in the scent of his shampoo. You okay? Yeah, Mrs. Carson said someone was coming to get me, but I told her it wasn't you. She kissed the top of his head, relieved beyond words. Briggs spoke briefly with the school principal, asking for the details of the call. It had come from a block number, the voicemail calm and certain. They'd given Mason's full name and described his backpack in detail. On the ride home, Mason sat in the back, swinging his feet. Hannah couldn't stop glancing at him in the mirror, as if to make sure he was still there. Briggs pulled up in front of her house, but didn't leave right away. Mrs. Miller, he said. This was an escalation. Whoever we're dealing with is getting bolder. They're probing for weaknesses. From now on, you don't go anywhere without telling us first. She nodded, her throat tight. That evening, after Mason went to bed, Hannah sat at the kitchen table with Rourke and Briggs. We've been tracking this group for months, Rourke explained. They target children in public spaces, malls, schools, parks. They work in pairs or small teams, and they plan every move. If one attempt fails, they change tactics. Hannah swallowed hard. And now they're try and get Mason? Rourke's eyes were steady. It's possible they think taking him would scare you into staying quiet or force John Carter to act. She remembered John's sharp gaze at the mall, the way he'd studied her face. Why would they think that? Because, Briggs said, when you stopped Eli from being taken, you put yourself in the middle of their operation. They don't like loose ends. The weight of his words made Hannah grip her coffee mug tighter. So what happens now? Rourke leaned forward. We increase security around you. That means agents will be nearby, watching the house, following you to and from school, work, stores. You won't always see us, but we'll be there. And Mason? He'll have protection too, Rourke said. Quietly. We don't want to alarm him, but he won't be left alone for a second. The next morning, Hannah woke to find a black sedan parked across the street. It wasn't the group's. It was theirs. She knew it now because she saw Briggs in the driver's seat, wearing sunglasses, pretending to read a newspaper. It should have made her feel safer. Instead, it reminded her that safety was no longer natural. It was guarded, borrowed, temporary. When she dropped Mason at school, she noticed another car, a silver SUV, parked just beyond the playground. No one got out. She told herself Briggs would handle it. But as she drove away, she kept thinking about the man in the gray hoodie, the sedan near the school, the stranger under the street lamp. They weren't just close anymore. They were circling. 2 days later, the pressure was starting to feel constant. Hannah had adjusted to seeing Briggs or another agent in the black sedan outside her home, but she hated the feeling of being watched, even by people who were supposed to protect her. Mason, thankfully, still seemed unaware. His world was school cartoons and his toy cars. Hannah worked hard to keep it that way. She didn't want his childhood to carry shadows. That morning, she decided to make a quick trip to the pharmacy while Mason was in class. Briggs was parked outside, and when she told him she was heading out, he nodded and said he'd follow at a distance. The pharmacy was quiet. She picked up some vitamins, a box of bandages, and a bottle of cough syrup. Just small errands to keep her day normal. She paid at the register, then stepped outside into the sharp winter air. That's when she saw it. Across the parking lot, a man stood by a silver SUV, arms crossed. His gaze was locked on her, and he didn't look away when she noticed. His face was pale, with a narrow jaw and dark hair combed straight back. She glanced toward Briggs's car. 2 rows over. He was there, but his head was turned, talking into his radio. When she looked back at the SUV, the man had slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. Her phone buzzed. Briggs calling. Get in your car now, he said sharply. She obeyed, her hands trembling as she started the engine. Briggs' sedan pulled out first, and she followed him. In the mirror, the silver SUV was moving too, but not toward them. It turned the opposite direction and disappeared into traffic. When they got back to her house, Briggs parked and came up to her driver's side window. That man, she said, he was just standing there, watching me. We saw him, Briggs replied. He's been spotted near Carter's safe house before. He's not some random stranger. The words made her stomach knot. So he's one of them? Most likely, Briggs said. And if he's showing himself now, it means they want you to know you're being watched. Later that afternoon, Mason came home from school chattering about a science project. Hannah forced herself to smile and ask questions, hiding the unease that had been clawing at her all day. After dinner, she put him to bed early. Then she sat at the kitchen table with Rourke, who had stopped by after Briggs called in the parking lot incident. They're testing your reactions, Rourke said, showing you they can get close without touching you. It's a psychological game. They want you off balance. Hannah folded her arms. It's working. That's why we need you to stick to our plan. Don't engage. Don't try to be clever. Let us handle the approach if they get closer. She hesitated. And what if they don't just watch? What if they... Try again. Rourke met her gaze evenly. Then we'll be ready. The next day, she stayed home. It was raining, a cold, steady drizzle that blurred the view outside her windows. The street was quiet except for the occasional passing car. Briggs' sedan sat in its usual spot across the street, wipers flicking rhythmically. Around 11 a.m., her phone buzzed with text from an unknown number. You can't stay inside forever. Her breath caught. She stared at the message, the green bubble sitting harmlessly on her screen, yet making her feel like the walls were closing in. She forwarded it to Rourke without replying. Within minutes, Briggs' sedan pulled up into her driveway. He came to the door, his jacket dripping from the rain. Pack a bag, he said. You're leaving for a few days. She blinked. What? Where? A safe location. They're getting too comfortable watching this house. In 20 minutes, she had thrown together a duffel bag with clothes for her and Mason, toiletries, and Mason's favorite plush dinosaur. Briggs loaded them into his car while another agent, someone she hadn't met before, took Mason out to the sedan, distracting him with small talk. They drove for almost an hour, winding through back roads and industrial areas before reaching a small brick building with no signs. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and paper. It looked like an ordinary office, but behind one locked door was a small furnished apartment. "This is where you'll stay," Briggs said. "No windows facing the street. No phone calls except to us. No stepping outside without an escort." Mason didn't seem to mind. He ran straight for the couch and started flipping through channels. Hannah, however, felt caged. She turned to Briggs. "How long do we stay here?" "As long as it takes to draw them out," he said. The first night in the safe house was strange. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the heating system made her alert. Around 2 a.m., she gave up trying to sleep and sat by the small table with a cup of tea. That's when she noticed it. The faint red light of a security camera in the corner of the ceiling. She hadn't realized the apartment was being monitored. It should have reassured her. Instead, it reminded her that she was in a place where being watched was necessary. By the third day, she was restless. Rourke visited in the morning with an update. "They've been quiet since the text," he said. "Too quiet." "What does that mean?" Hannah asked. "It means they're planning something." The words sat in her stomach like a stone. Rourke glanced toward Mason, who was building a Lego tower in the corner. "We'll keep cycling agents in and out, so there's always fresh eyes on the place. Just be ready for us to move quickly if we need to." Hannah nodded slowly, gripping her coffee mug. "I've been ready since the day I found Eli." That night, a storm rolled in, rain pounded the roof, and thunder rattled the windows. Mason had fallen asleep early, curled up on the couch under a blanket. Hannah was in the kitchenette washing dishes when she heard it, a single, sharp knock on the apartment door. She froze. Briggs was supposed to be on duty in the hall. She dried her hands on a towel, moving silently toward the door. Another knock, this one softer, slower. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She leaned toward the peephole. The hallway outside was empty. Hannah's heart was hammering. The peephole showed nothing but the dim hallway, lit by one flickering light bulb. No shadow under the door. No movement. She stood there for several seconds, holding her breath, half expecting another knock. Instead, there was silence, so still that she could hear the hum of the refrigerator across the room. Her first thought was to call for Briggs. But what if he had stepped away for a moment? What if whoever knocked was gone by now? She backed away from the door and grabbed her phone, dialing Briggs's number. He answered on the second ring. "Yeah." "There was a knock," she whispered. "Twice. I looked. No one there. I'm outside the building." Briggs said, "I didn't see anyone come in or out. Stay put. I'm coming up." She hung up and glanced toward the couch where Mason was sleeping, his small chest rising and falling under the blanket. She didn't want to wake him unless she had to. Within a minute, Briggs was at the door. This time, she unlocked it and let him in. His hair was wet from the rain, and his hand rested on the edge of his jacket, near his holstered weapon. "You're sure about the knocks?" he asked quietly. "I'm sure," she said. "It wasn't my imagination." Briggs scanned the hallway outside, then closed the door again. No cameras in this stretch. They could have knocked and walked away before you got to the door. "But how did they get in?" she asked. "Don't you have agents downstairs?" "We do. Which means—" His jaw tightened. "If it was them, they're testing the building, checking how fast we respond." The rest of the night was uneasy. Briggs stayed in the apartment, sitting in a chair near the door while Hannah tried to rest on the couch. She drifted in and out of light sleep, started awake every time thunder cracked. By morning, the storm had passed, but the tension in her chest hadn't. Rourke arrived with coffee and a grim expression. "We found muddy footprints in the stairwell," he said. "They don't match any of our agents' boots." Hannah's stomach turned. "So they were here." "Looks like it," Rourke said. "They didn't try to force entry, which means they weren't ready to act." "Not yet." Briggs set his coffee down. "Or they wanted her to know they can get close." Rourke nodded slightly, his eyes on Hannah. "Either way, it's a warning." Later that day, Mason sat on the floor with his Lego set while Hannah watched the security monitor they'd placed on the small kitchen counter. For camera feeds showed the hallway, the stairwell, the back exit, and the street outside. Everything looked quiet until a figure appeared briefly on the street camera, a tall man in a dark jacket, hood up, walking slowly past the building. He never looked at the camera, but she had the sickening feeling he knew it was there. She pointed at the screen. "That him?" Briggs leaned over. "Could be. Hard to tell with the hood." Rourke didn't take his eyes off the monitor. "They're circling. We're moving you again." That night, they transferred her and Mason in an unmarked van. It was a tense ride. 2 agents in the front, Rourke beside her, Mason asleep on her shoulder. They drove for over an hour, finally arriving at a small single-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. "This is another safe location," Rourke said as they carried their bags inside. "Less control than the last place, but we've got eyes on all sides. No one gets close without us knowing." Hannah glanced around. The house was plain, neutral walls, minimal furniture, no personal touches. It felt temporary. The first 2 days they were calm. Briggs rotated with 2 other agents she didn't know, each shift keeping watch from a car parked half a block away. On the 3rd afternoon, she was in the kitchen making sandwiches when Mason called from the living room. "Mom, there's someone outside." Her pulse spiked. She hurried to the front window. At the end of the driveway, a small package sat on the ground. No one was in sight. She opened the door just enough to call to Briggs, who was sitting in the surveillance car. Within seconds, he was jogging up the driveway. "Don't touch it," he said, crouching beside the box. He slipped on gloves, opened it carefully, and froze. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. Hannah stepped closer, her stomach tightening. It was a picture of her and Mason, taken 2 days ago at the kitchen table in the safe house apartment. Her knees went weak. How? How did they get that? Briggs's voice was grim. "Someone was in the building with a camera, right under our noses." That night, Hannah barely ate. Mason, thankfully, was too distracted by a movie to ask questions. She sat in the dim living room with Rourke, who studied the Polaroid under a desk lamp. "This isn't just intimidation," he said finally. "They're proving they can get close without you knowing. They want you scared enough to make a mistake." Hannah shook her head. "I'm not making mistakes. I just want this over." Rourke's expression was steady but serious. "It will end, but they're not done yet, and neither are we." The next morning, she decided to keep busy, cleaning the kitchen while Mason played in the backyard. Briggs stood near the fence, keeping watch. For the first time in days, Hannah let herself breathe a little. The sun was out, Mason was laughing, and there were no strange cars in sight. Then the sound of tires on gravel broke the moment. A white van slowed as it passed the house. Briggs's posture shifted instantly. The van didn't stop, but as it rolled by, Hannah saw the driver glance toward the yard, a slow, measuring look that made her skin crawl. Briggs stepped inside, phone already in hand. "We've got movement," he said into the receiver. Hannah gathered Mason in her arms, holding him close. The feeling was back, shadows pressing in, closer than ever. The white van disappeared around the corner, but the tension it left behind stayed thick in the air. Briggs stayed near the front window, phone in hand, scanning the street. "They didn't stop, but they slowed down enough to look," he said. "That's a probe. They're mapping the area." Hannah stood with Mason still in her arms. "Should we move again?" "Not yet." Rourke's voice came through Briggs's phone. "We'll increase the perimeter first. Keep her inside. We've got 2 additional units on the way." Briggs hung up, but his jaw stayed tight. He knew as well as she did, if someone really wanted to get close, sometimes all the extra cars in the world were enough. For the next 2 hours, the safe house felt like a bunker. The blinds stayed down, and Mason wasn't allowed in the backyard. Hannah busied herself in the kitchen, tried to keep her hands from shaking as she chopped vegetables for lunch. Around 3 p.m., there was a knock on the back door. It was quiet, just 2 taps, but it cut through the house like a blade. Briggs was there instantly, motioning her to stay back. He drew his sidearm and checked the small security screen by the door. The camera feed showed a man in a delivery, uniform holding a cardboard box. Briggs opened the door halfway, blocking the entrance with his body. "Delivery for who?" The man glanced down at a clipboard. Hannah Reed?" Hannah's heart jumped into her throat. She hadn't ordered anything. Briggs didn't take the box. "Who sent it?" "Doesn't say. I'm just dropping it off." The man's tone was calm, but his eyes kept flicking past Briggs into the house. Briggs stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Hannah could hear his voice, low and firm, but not the words. After a minute, he came back inside, without the box. "He's leaving," Briggs said. "We'll have the package checked." "Was it them?" Hannah asked. Could be nothing. Either way, you don't take chances with something that shows up unannounced. That evening, Rourke himself arrived at the safe house. He looked more tired than usual, but his voice was steady. "Good news and bad news," he said, setting his coat on the chair. "Good news is, we think we've identified at least one person following you, a man named Victor Soren. He used to work overseas in private security. Not someone you want near your kid." Hannah felt her stomach knot. "And the bad news?" "He's not working alone, and he's smart enough to stay just far enough out of reach that we can't grab him, without proof of intent." "Why is he after us?" she asked. Rourke's pause was long. "I'm not certain. But I can tell you this. People like him don't just pick random targets. There's a reason, and we'll find it." That night, rain started again. The sound on the roof was heavy, constant, almost masking the occasional creak of the house settling. Hannah couldn't sleep. She sat on the couch, watching the glow from the street lamp outside through a gap in the blinds. Around 1:15 a.m., a black SUV rolled slowly down the street. It didn't stop, but it didn't drive past quickly either. Hannah grabbed her phone and called Briggs, who was in the surveillance car. "I see it," he said before she could speak. "No plates on the front. Tinted windows. I'm on it." He started the car and pulled away from the curb, following. She stayed on the line until his voice returned. They turned off a block down, lost sight in the rain. Her grip tightened on the phone. They're testing us again, aren't they? Yeah, he said quietly. And they're getting bolder. The next morning, the air felt heavier, like the house itself knew something was coming. Hannah tried to keep Mason busy with drawing and puzzles, but every sound from outside made her glance toward the window. At 10:42 a.m., the front gate creaked. Briggs moved to the window, frowning. A boy, maybe 15 or 16, stood there holding a manila envelope. He looked nervous, shifting from foot to foot in the drizzle. Briggs went out to meet him, speaking quietly. After a short exchange, the boy handed him the envelope and jogged away. Briggs brought it inside and laid it on the table. No markings, no return address. Hannah hesitated, then nodded for him to open it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, printed in bold black letters. You're not safe here. Move. Her hands went cold. What does that mean? Are they threatening me or warning me? Rourke, who had just walked in, glanced at the note. Could be either, could be both. But it tells us one thing. They want you on edge. The more afraid you are, the easier you are to manipulate. By afternoon, the rain had stopped, leaving the neighborhood washed clean but eerily quiet. Hannah tried to convince herself it was just another tactic to scare her. But that night, she woke to headlights sweeping across the bedroom wall. She sat up, heart pounding. Through the crack in the blinds, she saw not one, but two SUVs idling across the street, dark, still, their engines faint in the night air. She reached for her phone, but froze. The sight of them, parked side by side, felt deliberate. A cold realization slid through her. Whatever was coming next, it was getting closer. The two SUVs sat across the street like silent guards, or predators waiting for a signal. Their headlights stayed off, but their engines idled low. A faint rumble she could feel in her chest more than hear. Hannah stayed crouched by the window, her phone in one hand. She wanted to call Briggs, but part of her didn't want to look away from the street. It felt like if she turned her back, they'd make a move. Downstairs, the floor creaked. She tensed until Briggs' voice came from below. Stay upstairs, Hannah. She hurried halfway down the stairs anyway. There are two, I know, he cut in, keeping his voice low. He was already at the front door, sidearm ready, eyes on the narrow crack between the curtains. Rourke's on his way. I'm not engaging unless they step onto property. Minutes dragged. The SUVs didn't move. Hannah could see silhouettes in the front seats, but no one got out. Then, without warning, the driver of the first SUV flicked the headlights on, just for a second, then off again. It was a signal. The second SUV's engine revved lightly in response. Briggs muttered something under his breath and stepped back from the window. They're talking to each other, not over phones. They're using visual signals. Her heart hammered. What does that mean? It means they don't want their words recorded, which means whatever this is, it's planned in person. 5 minutes later, another vehicle approached from the far end of the street, a black sedan, sleek and low. It stopped between the two SUVs, headlights cutting through the dark. The rear door opened. A tall man in a gray coat stepped out. Even from the distance, Hannah could tell he moved like someone who didn't waste effort, controlled, deliberate. The man didn't walk toward the house. He just stood in the street, looking up at it. At her, Briggs' voice was flat. That's Soren. The name made her stomach twist. The one you told me about? Yes, and he doesn't usually show himself unless he's ready to make a point. The man in the gray coat stood there for maybe 20 seconds, then turned and got back into the sedan. Without a word, the three vehicles pulled away in opposite directions, gone in under a minute. Hannah's knees felt weak. What was that? Why come all the way here just to leave? Briggs locked the front door again. It's psychological. He's telling us he can get this close whenever he wants. That we can't stop him from standing right in front of you. She swallowed hard. Can you? He didn't answer right away. We'll try, but now we know his face. That gives us something. Rourke arrived less than half an hour later, rain on his coat, expression tight. Soren's not supposed to operate stateside. If he's here, it means he's either working for someone with deep reach, or he's breaking rules big enough that someone's paying to look the other way. I don't care about his rules, Hannah said sharply. I care about my son. Why is this happening? Rourke held her gaze. I think I'm starting to piece it together, but I need one more confirmation before I say it. For now, I'm doubling your protection. The next morning, two more agents arrived, one in her late 20s with a quick, sharp look, and another in his 40s with the build of a linebacker. They introduced themselves only as Keene and Foster. Keene took the upstairs watch. Foster stayed by the front door, scanning the street through a narrow slit in the blinds. The added presence helped, but not enough to calm Hannah's mind. Every sound from outside still made her pulse jump. Mason sensed it too. He stayed unusually close to her, not running around the house like he usually did. At noon, a call came through to Briggs' encrypted phone. Hannah caught only his side of the conversation. You're sure it's him? When? No, don't engage yet. Just keep eyes. He hung up and met Rourke's eyes. Soren was spotted at a warehouse near the docks, less than 30 miles from here. Rourke nodded slowly. That's not random. Docks mean shipments. Shipments mean something's coming or going that he cares about. Briggs looked at Hannah. We could move you again, but I think we're past running. If we find out what's at that warehouse, we might finally understand why you're in this. That afternoon, Rourke left with Briggs to check the docks, leaving Keene and Foster at the house. The hours crawled by. Hannah tried to keep Mason busy, but her mind kept drifting to gray-coated men and silent SUVs. Just before dusk, she caught movement from the corner of her eye. Across the street, a lone figure stood near the corner, too far to see clearly, but watching the house. Keene saw it too. Stay back, she whispered, moving to the window. She lifted binoculars, scanned, then muttered a curse. Hannah's chest tightened. Is it him? No, Keene said. Someone younger. Could be a scout. Foster stepped outside to get a better look, but by the time he reached the sidewalk, the figure was gone, slipped away into the evening crowd. The incident seemed small compared to SUVs and gray coats, but it left Hannah uneasy. A scout meant preparation. Preparation meant they weren't done yet. That night, she couldn't sleep again. Near 1 a.m., she wandered into the living room for water and froze. Through the blinds, she saw a slip of paper taped to the front gate. She hadn't heard anyone approach. Her voice shook as she woke Keene. They went out together, Foster covering from the porch. The note was handwritten this time, in block letters. 5 days. 5 days. That had been 2 days ago. Now it was day 3. 2 days left. Briggs and Rourke had been working almost nonstop since the note appeared, taking turns at the house, switching vehicles, changing routes when they left for groceries or school drop-off. Still, the unease never left Hannah's chest. She'd stopped asking Mason to play outside. Every door stayed locked. And at night, she kept the lights dim so no one could see clearly inside from the street. That morning, Rourke called her into the living room. He had a map spread out on the coffee table, with circles drawn in thick red marker. This is what we know, he said. Soren's been seen at 3 locations. 2 are warehouses by the docks. The third is a private hangar outside the city. Briggs leaned over the map. The hangar's interesting. Less security there than the docks. Easier to move something or someone out fast. Hannah stared at the red circles. You're saying they might take Mason? No one answered. They didn't need to. The plan was simple in theory. Watch the hangar, confirm Soren's movements, and intercept if necessary. In practice, it was dangerous. They couldn't involve local police yet. Too many unknowns, too much risk of leaks. That night, Briggs left with Rourke to stake out the hangar. Keene and Foster stayed at the house. Hannah tried to sleep, but every creak of the old floorboards made her eyes snap open. Around 2 a.m., Keene's radio crackled softly. A male voice, Briggs, came through. We've got movement. Soren just arrived at the hangar. He's not alone. Do you need backup? Keene asked. Not yet, Briggs replied. We're tailing them. By 3 a.m., Hannah was sitting on the couch with Mason asleep against her side, still clutching his toy truck. The TV was on but muted, flickering light across the dark room. Foster stood at the window, watching the street. Keene was on the back porch, scanning the alley. Then headlights flared at the far end of the block. 2 vehicles, moving slowly. Hannah's breath caught. Keene, Foster called quietly. Front. She came inside fast, hand on her sidearm. The 2 vehicles stopped outside. SUVs. Black. Same as before. No one got out at first. Then the driver's door of the first SUV opened. A man stepped out, tall, gray coat. Soren. He didn't walk toward the house. Instead, he opened the rear passenger door and pulled someone out. Hannah's heart slammed when she saw Briggs. His hands were zip-tied in front of him, a thin cut across his cheek. Keene swore under her breath. They got him. Before she could open the door, Soren raised a hand. Calm, measured, he called out, voice carrying in the quiet street. Mrs. Cole, we need to talk. Keene motioned Hannah back. Foster stayed ready at the window. Soren spoke again. 5 days, remember? You still have 2. But if you want him, he nodded toward Briggs. To see that day, you'll hear me out. Keene leaned close to Hannah. Do not step outside. But Hannah's mind was racing. If Briggs was here, maybe they could end this now, before Mason was in danger. She stood anyway, moving to the door. Keene grabbed her arm. Hannah, I'm just going to listen, she whispered. That's all. The cold air hit her as she stepped onto the porch. Soren's eyes followed her, sharp but calm. You did something, Mrs. Cole, he said evenly. You don't realize it, but you did, and now I need it undone. I don't even know who you are, she said, her voice shaking. You picked up a child at the mall, he replied. A lost child, my target son. When you took him to security, you shut down my operation in 10 minutes flat. I don't take that lightly. Her stomach dropped. "That little boy is safe," Soren said. "But because of you, I lost something far more valuable. Now you're going to help me get it back." Keen had her radio in hand, murmuring into it. Foster stayed rigid by the window. Hannah looked at Briggs. He gave the smallest shake of his head. "Don't agree." Soren saw it too. "One way or another, Mrs. Cole," he said, "I get what I came for. 2 days from now, I'm either walking away satisfied or leaving with something you care about even more than your own life." He glanced toward the front window, toward Mason. Her pulse thundered in her ears. From down the block, the low growl of an engine approached fast. A third vehicle. It swung into view, a black sedan with its headlights off until last second. The moment they flashed on, Soren's men reacted, looking toward it. Briggs moved first, slamming his shoulder into the man holding him, breaking the zip tie against the edge of the SUV's door frame. He dropped low, rolling clear. Keen fired once, sharp, deafening, forcing Soren to step back. The sedan screeched to a halt. Rourke jumped out, weapon drawn. The street erupted into chaos, shouts, the slam of car doors, the squeal of tires. Soren moved with surprising speed, ducking behind his SUV. One of his men returned fire, hitting the porch rail inches from Hannah's hand. Rourke's voice cut through the noise. "Get inside. Now!" Hannah grabbed Mason from Foster and bolted to the back of the house as glass shattered in the living room. She didn't look back. She didn't have to, because she knew, without a doubt, this wasn't over. That was the night 2 SUVs parked in front of her house. That was the night she finally understood this fight wasn't about chance anymore. It was personal. If you like this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also and other to strengthen our community. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from and what time you are currently watching this video.